So there's this album. It's Farrah Abraham's 2012 outsider pop masterpiece, My Teenage Dream Ended. I remember listening to this album for the first time and I was so blown away on first listen. Like, you need to experience this before I can even start talking about it. I just need to give you the smallest taste of this album, the musical genius that you're not ready for this musical genius. That's all I'm gonna say.
Hey, you called last night?
I can only put so much in a song. I know no situation is ever the same. Cut off oxygen to my brain.
Songs you wouldn't get on the first listen. So, one thing to know about me is that I'm very primed to like music like this. Around the time when I first heard this, I was very into pacing music. Very known for weird, quirky, electronic sounds. Artists such as GFOTY.
It's big. Everything is stars and stripes. A cowgirl is getting drunk tonight.
Hannah Diamond. Namasenda. Not all of them are still in the group, but they've all been associated with it. They've collabed with Sophie a lot, so I'm obviously really into the aggressively electronic. I just think that everyone needs to appreciate this for how much of an electro bangers they are. Here's another one. Oh my god, it goes so hard on the dance floor. No joke. This stuff goes so hard on the dance floor.
Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby. Together our part, let's set the tone.
Songs you wouldn't get on the first listen. Okay, for context, maybe it's not gonna strike you as much of a surprise, but people did not like this when it released. I'm on another monitor, reading from this Jezebel article. Holy fucking shit. God, okay. Teen mom Farrah Abraham releases the worst song you will ever hear. Ever. Okay. And God, some of this I haven't read at all. Here's what I've read when I realized I need to share this. I understand why Farrah chose to have and raise her baby Sophia, but her song really should have been aborted. If you're pregnant, it probably isn't safe to listen to it. Oh my... what the hell? Whatever happened to sisterhood? Jezebel was that 16 and pregnant bitch. You better know her fucking place. Yeah. Oh my god. I can't handle this. It's a song about recovering from suicidal thoughts. The irony is that it will make you want to kill yourself. What? That is so uncalled for. I can't believe that. The Wikipedia page called Jezebel a feminist website. This is not feminist. Holy shit. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. Oh my god. They dunk on her personally. They dunk on her personally. They're she says she's clean now, but at least one friend begs to differ. What the fuck? They went in on her for no good reason. Just because they didn't like her album. Like, people really hated this album. Oh my god. No. It's so awful. I'm not even gonna. It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. Oh my god. Oh, that's 16 and pregnant, bitch. Like, she's getting ahead of herself. We gotta make her know her place. She can't be out here making experimental music. No, she can't be living her best life. We gotta put that shit down into the ground now. God. Oh my god. Woman on woman violence. So, like, I definitely liked it a little bit for the meme because it makes my taste stand out. But as I did unironically think that the songs were just like really fun to listen to, that they were very dancey in a cool way and very emotive. I don't know. Um, but as I've listened to this album, it's actually become one of the saddest albums I've ever heard. I think it is one of the most uniquely raw and honest albums out there. For context, Farrah Abraham grew to reality TV star fame through 16 and Pregnant. Derek, the father of her baby, was like revealed to have died. And she wrote this memoir to kind of like describe their relationship and like where she's going from there. And to accompany the memoir, she wrote this album. All the song names, they all match up to chapters in the book. So it also sort of follows that memoir format. Oh my god. I've read the Farrah Abraham book. I've watched the Farrah Abraham TV show. My life has not been the same since I've heard this album. So, like, throughout the course of the book and album, there is just a lot going on. Like, Farrah actually has a very complicated life and a very rocky journey from start to finish that she describes. Like, I don't want to say anything that puts too much judgment on anyone involved, but there is one event that sticks out to me that also has a song of its own where she is caught having sex with Derek by her parents, and then her dad like he goes downstairs with Derek to like speak alone with him, and then the next day Farrah finds out from her parents that Derek's mom is filing charges against her dad because her dad hit Derek. And then, like, when her parents are talking to her about this, they're actually like, this is your fault. Like, you brought him in, and now your dad's gonna go to jail, or he might go to jail. Like, it was really intense. And by the end of the memoir, it does seem like they're working on it. That they're trying to go to new places, and try to, like, work on themselves. And I haven't really updated that because this is more about the album. Like, I'm trying to get you to listen to this. If you're interested in her story, like, check her all out. But you need to be listening to this album. It's so good. The more I think about like the situation of Derek and Farrah, they live in like, I think it's Iowa. Like, I'm not even gonna fact check that right now. But yeah, they live in like middle of nowhere, and their story is so sad. Like, even like the whole context of it. Like, Farrah, she wants an abortion at one point. She can't get it. It forces her on this journey where she's young. She's scared. Her parents are angry at her for having sex and all this stuff. And it's like, Derek is a mess. Derek is very mean to her. Derek is someone that I'm just going to say is very much like a product of where he was raised. It's like these people are the effects of American culture themselves, and then they go through this whole ordeal filmed on television to like be fed back into this machine where it's like the cycle is continuing, where they're going to feed you back like family persevering, raising your own baby. And it's like it just keeps on going. It's perverse, it's depressing. So this is a loaded album. The lyrics are actually like really intense sometimes about very hard topics, and like it really came from her heart. Like these came from her diary. So like these are deeply personal, deeply hurt, searching, like, oh my god, you can say like anything about it, but yeah, raw. Like, this is from the source. So like what you see first, you see the dance, you see the meme, but like What I missed was some of the more confessional tracks as well. Like you have the piano driven without this ring, and then like these more orchestral pieces like Liar Liar and Searching for Closure. Liar Liar has some poetry in it, let me tell you. Like check out these lyrics. Like this chorus, I think is like one of the best moments. So the general idea though that like really interests me about this album is how I genuinely do find it extremely honest and extremely sad, yet it doesn't follow all of the rules for a sad song you'd find on the radio. It doesn't necessarily follow all of the ballad rules or all of the sad song rules, even though like some of the tracks do mimic those a bit more closely than others. But then you have some that are like straight up four to the floor dance tracks. It's oh my god, it's so beautiful. It is specifically these differences I want to like zoom in on and try to figure out like how the song is working, what is it doing, how is it expressing what Farrah is feeling, which I think there are two main elements that stick out to me. So first, there's the vocals. She comes across as almost this struggling robot trying to convey sadness. Like there's an algorithm in her head that's telling her, you are sad. But then the output that she's giving just like can't quite do it. She can't put out the proper output for that. Something's going wrong. She can't fully process it. She's just spitting out words and lyrics and sounds trying to get at what her algorithm is telling her. Then there's the mismatch of genres and instrumentation, where she's bringing together like confessional singing, but heavy electronics, a little bit of like string synths at sometimes, a little bit piano. Oftentimes just like a whole mismatch of sounds that really sound like, woo, like they're going at it. I think as part of the songs, these elements literally embody her experience of recollecting her memories, like literalizing her experience of being traumatized. The vocals, through their offbeat quality, they feel distant from the song itself, possibly manifesting this like distant quality she has, a distant feeling that she has when she remembers these events. Like it's her position and remembering everything. In some way, she's stuck in the past, yet in other times, her emotional experience is still detached from that. She's still in the present. An attempt at a more deep analysis is to say that the song's structure, like the beats, the melody, what have you, like the music itself, I guess, the instrumentation, that's like the body, her presence, the environment. And then the lyrics, on the other hand, are more like her psyche, her feelings, like her experience. When you think about the lyrics, like they're not telling you exactly what's happening, but what she has perceived to be happening as she remembers everything. And then she is telling us, translating how it makes her feel. So while she's still inside the song, she is experiencing like these memories and events. Her psyche and feelings, they still feel disattached from it all. She is still remembering and processing and then like communicating outside of it all. And I think another cool thing about like her robotic auto-tuned voice is that to me it also represents the way that there's a miscommunication often between trauma victims and like other people. Trauma victims aren't just like, they don't necessarily portray their sadness in like conventional ways or the ways people want them to. Like they might be really angry, they might be really stoic, they might start laughing, and then like it might all kind of get mishmashed together. This is just like personal experience from reading things. If you look at something like the Kesha lawsuit with Dr. Luke, like I think you'd probably find a lot of like, oh, why is she remembering things like this? Why is she acting like this? So I think it's actually like really common for just like traumatized people to not act right and then get like a little punished for it. And then so you have this robotic voice that like is literally that. Like people want Farrah to sing this sad ballad about like Derek and how she feels, but it's like even when she's giving the sad ballad and Liar Liar, it's this robotic voice that's auto-tuned and like not hitting the notes right. Like it's not quite there yet. It's so real. It's still honest. I think with genre, my reading of it's a little more simple. Like it's kind of the same thing. It's just like it literalizes, it manifests, embodies like exactly how she's feeling. I think an easy example of this is that little opener that I showed you. The lyrics are cut off oxygen to my brain, the anxiety fills my veins. As you just got that rubbing electronic pulsing like synth going just at it. I think it's an attempt to literally be how she's feeling as she's getting the phone call that, oh, Derek died, and like all the awful feelings that are like immediately happening to her. These two elements really come together at times, especially in tracks such as Caught in the Act, where you have these flighty, urgent strings coming in, aggressively webbing synths, as usual, and some of her most offbeat vocal performances in the whole album. It's like spoken. She has a spoken word portion. It's great though. Like I think it definitely like it feels very Valley Girl, but it's exactly how she's feeling. This is the song and chapter that's about her getting caught with Derek, as I've described before, and like the punishment that she experienced at the hands of her parents for things that her dad did. That's a deeply traumatic memory. You have like feelings of guilt coming in, guilt for getting caught, the guilt that her parents made her feel, whatever like sense of righteousness she has, her past love for Derek, the relationship with her parents, like it's all coming together here, and it's just like this. Oh, it is must be just so difficult to process. So what you get is this like less than 2 minute song that just feels like it is mashing everything together that like makes this album horrible, but yeah, it's so perfect. Like this is maximum confusion, super ultra fever dream, just so literally remembering this horrible memory. I do also want to try to dig a little more into Farrah's choice to be so different from conventional standards. Like, a lot of people might still be asking at this point, especially if I didn't really, like, sell my last argument to them, like, why deviate from, like, a ballad? Like, why not just try to make a good song that expresses your feelings so that everyone else can enjoy it and like it and understand you? So what I kind of, like, personally subscribe to is this sort of symbolic dilemma. This was introduced to me by David Halperin, who is okay. He is people who know me. They know that I love this guy. I've read a decent amount of his stuff. Yeah, How to Be Gay. Check it out. So in that book, it introduced me to this idea that there is this like symbolic gap between your communication and like what you're actually feeling. He brings up this gap between any sort of expression and like what you're actually feeling. So the gap between like a symbol that you put out and how you're actually feeling on the inside. And like he uses the example of the Iliad where Achilles loses Patroclus, if I'm saying these names right. And then he kills Hector, but then it's like that doesn't like assuage any of his feelings because he's not accepting the symbols. I don't know. He argues that the Iliad is very much about like finding socially acceptable signs to represent how you're feeling, and that part of the tragedy is like Achilles not acknowledging it and just going too far. But I haven't read the Iliad, so like I'm reading these chapters, I'm like, good point. Yeah. So I trust him because I like him a lot. But it makes a lot of sense to me. So, like, obviously, what you tell people is never quite exactly how you're feeling. And ballads and sad songs fall into this, where, technically, they aren't quite what they're feeling. They're trying to sell you on their feeling. They're using, for the most part, like conventional standards for expressing sadness and, throwing them at you. They're trying to be grand and intense about it. Their voice, they're swelling at the right moments. They're trying to persuade you. And then, part of the interaction is that, like, you're kind of convincing yourself, like, yeah, I feel this. There's enough grandness in their voice, enough sadness in their voice. Like, I feel this. I believe them. Ballad singers are using socially acceptable symbols to convey their sadness. And, like, other sad song singers, and, like, whatever you want to call them, I don't know. For some people, that might leave them in a bit of a dilemma. What if I don't personally believe that these symbols work? What if they don't work for me? What if I feel like that because they're so culturally mandated and accepted on, that they're no longer genuine to me? Which I guess that's like my question of the ballad. I do like a lot of ballads, but like they really have to sell me, or else I usually just find them really boring. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna listen to Farrah Abraham. So I think in some ways, like, maybe Farrah is sort of traveling back to her own feeling. If there's like X gap between how she feels and the way like a normal ballad would represent their feelings, then she's trying to do like X minus Y distance. In some ways, I'm reading this album as like an attempt to go from communication to like really making the listener feel it. Like, she's trying to fuse our consciousnesses together, like the third impact, except it's not that extreme. There are still definitely elements of like socially conventional sad symbols in her songs. Like, she does use a little bit of ballad influence at times. The lyrics themselves are conventionally sad. I don't think you can read these on Genius and laugh at her anymore. If the music doesn't do it for you, just read the stuff on Genius, and to get her. So I'm wondering if there is any potential to see that, like, music that does weird stuff is attempting to, like, overcome the symbolic gap. And even though it's impossible, it at least does expand to new possibilities and, like, new ways of expressing sadness. And, you might never get the one, you can't, like, literally fuse people into you. But, she found the mode of sadness that she was like, yes, I want to put this out into the world. And like, she did hear these songs before she released them. Like, she liked them. She was like, this is me. She was able to create the Farrah Abraham album. And it is the Farrah Abraham album. There's also this larger picture of like legibility of emotion going on and like universalization. When I say legibility, I'm talking about like what gets you visibly rendered and recognized as like X sort of identity or emotion. So in this case, like, what will get you recognized as sad? Using traditional conventions of sadness is then your route to that. But I think this exposes the sort of power that these very specific modes of expression have on our culture. What happens is this heartfelt album becomes a meme against its own will. You don't have to like the album, but it's like Farrah Abraham's album like really didn't crack the code, except for like a small handful of elite critics. It wasn't even just like, oh, this sad, pathetic album sounds bad. Like, people just like dunked on it. Like, they mostly people had awful things to say about it. Like, it just did not even register as like sad. Like, people were so mean. And it's like, it's still fun to be aware of it. So like, this is still my cheeky little pick. Like, I can do both. I can both kind of like make this my little fun meme album and like also recognize it for like the sad piece of work that it is and like the emotional rawness that Farrah put into this album. What this whole dilemma really makes me think of is this book that I read called The Robotic Imaginary by Jennifer Rhee. And there's a chapter on emotion where she describes this robot that's being designed to express specific emotions. At least, this is as close as I'm getting. This is really all from memory because I don't own this book. And she describes this larger issue where this robot, I think it's supposed to like help teach people like what sort of emotions people express when they feel certain ways. It's setting into stone specific facial expressions to map to certain emotions. She describes how like once this specific system of facial expressions becomes a part of like the culture and how we interpret people, and it becomes too rigid, we can start to punish people who don't fall into it. So like if someone's face isn't close enough to like the sad face, the proper sad face, then they can be considered not sad. And she draws this into a larger picture of xenophobia, where brown people from other countries are literally pushed outside of the human when they aren't deemed to be expressing their emotions properly. And then I can't remember if this is a book example or not, but like what this really makes me think about is like at an airport or something, where if like a brown person gets targeted, the way that they look, like not just like their skin, but like their facial expression, like the way they react to it, can be used against them. It just has to be put against the right standard. And by like the right standard, I mean like the standard that they are not conforming to. So then I think that this album becomes like a lower stakes example of the ways that we can reflexively dehumanize people if their emotional expression doesn't line up with our expectations. Which I like believe that we have a very strong, rigid set of expectations in our culture right now that aren't like super flexible. Like I guess it probably could be worse, but I don't know. I'm just opinion piece right here. I can't really bring up the receipts. I've only just started. It's probably a little bit of a bad look to bring this argument that's very centered on brown people and to like wrap it around and apply it to some white woman. But in other ways, what I'm trying to do is just show like a lot of different struggles as related. So in this case, this might be like a little bit of misogyny or just like, it's an outside example of the same phenomenon. I think I am following the structure of that book a little more than it may seem because Rhea is definitely starting from a lot of like more white feminist texts like Stepford Wives. She talks about what is it called? Do androids dream of electric sheep? And then she takes those as starting points and like expands the picture. I'm trying to bring this Farrah Abraham album into a larger picture. I'm trying to make it the springboard and not the focus. And then I also think like I can kind of expand a little further on like what I remember from this book with Farrah Abraham, because my teenage dream is very much about trauma and an example of like an embodiment of like a post-traumatic reaction, like a post-traumatic like remembrance of memory, like a lot of that stuff. And that trauma, I think, is also a part of that larger picture of like acceptable expressions of emotion and like non-acceptable ones, and like processes of dehumanization that can get traumatized people veiled maybe, or maybe like kind of incarcerated. And it's definitely a large picture on like a lot of the misogyny and racism I've been talking about too. Like it's all a part of that whole thing, especially in the context of the robotic imaginary. We're talking about brown people in like war-torn countries, like where the focus is like we're the ones that are drone bombing them. Like that's definitely a traumatic experience of its own. I think is probably worth looking into with like a trauma perspective, I guess. So I think it can also still come back around and center those exact same people. What Rhee warns against, though, is to avoid drawing these people too far into our own universalizations. For her, what this means is that a lot of people look at those brown people from other countries and they sort of envision them as like proxy Americans, even like proxy white Americans, because it's only people like us that we have a hard time imagining violence happening to. So then we bring them within our own definitions of the human. But the weakness of this is that it keeps the system chugging along. We don't actually analyze like what it is about our own like sort of cultural view of what is human and what is not human that allows us to do the things that we do. So we rehabilitate one group of people, but then we're just chugging along to like the next. The next group of people are going to get have bad things happen to them. The cycle continues. So then it just like leaves me wondering like, have I or have I not rehabilitated Farrah Abraham into like our own universalizations around sadness? Like, her album genuinely does make me sad. I think like in some ways I did. Like, I'm still arguing this is a very sad album, and that's also because it does contain like traditionally sad elements. I think like in other ways I do want the sort of like different aspects of this album, like the weird voice, the mashing of genres, to kind of be considered their own unique thing. Like, probably better situated within my whole like trauma little reading, like sort of like another language of like trauma expression or something like that. I don't know. I think it occupies its own space, and I do want to like keep it there because it's not about being like, oh, Farrah Abraham's album is actually really sad. It's still letting it stand for like the unique work of art it is. It's that kind of acceptance of it that lets me still be a little ironic about it and a little fun. I think like in the grand scheme of things, in my own views on like culture and stuff, like I feel like everyone should develop their own personal taste and personal culture. And I think it will involve like finding objects such as Farrah Abraham's My Teenage Dream Ended, and sort of being like, yeah, like I feel this, I get this, even though it's not necessarily what like the my main culture is like telling me to listen to. And like, I don't think that means that you have to like every single thing that's like actually really sad or actually really cool. So like, I'm not gonna force anyone to like this album, but I do think you should avoid like punishing people for vibing with this, you know? And some people got really personal about this album. Like, that Jezebel article, like, it was a little bit of a hit piece, especially at the end, where she's like, "Oh, Farrah Abraham might not be as clean as she says she is." Like, wow, no, that person just like was so offended by this album that she just like went in on Farrah with like the most personal insults. When it's good enough and funny enough just to like vividly describe what you're experiencing. Like, oh, this thing is the worst thing I've ever heard. Like, you can still say that. Like, people say that in the funniest ways possible. I love reading stuff like that. That really felt like sandpaper scratching up my anus. Like, I don't know, like something kind of wacky like that. I'm not a poet. It's like it's those unique aspects of this album that just like make this glimpse into Farrah that you're not gonna get anywhere else. Like, the Farrah Abraham in 16 and Pregnant, even a little bit in her memoir, they're their own thing. They've been edited. She's presenting a certain side of herself that can like go public and viral. And then like this album feels like the one thing that resisted that a little bit. Like, it still got a lot of attention, but it was like as a meme, and it's not even like it wasn't even quite like Friday, Rebecca Black's Friday. It wasn't even quite that big. This album, it's a glimpse, the unexpected refusal from Farrah Abraham to like be who we expected her to be. Just trying to get a little bit closer to like who she truly is, or at least just present an alternative and expand in our vision, expand our view of her. I don't know. And like, I want to see more of this. That's like my little dream world. I think you can totally live in like a more fully, genuinely multicultural world when you can like let people be weird or like opaque or like be comfortable with not understanding them, but then like also have your own freedom to choose like your own weird and opaque sort of culture or self culture. So yeah, so that's me trying to tie this album to the big picture. But hope you listen to it. Just listen to it at least. Like, it's the greatest thing ever. I I've listened to it so much. I can listen to it all the way through. It's no skips. I can dance to it. I've jammed out to it in my car. I just unironically love this album.